Thank you for everybody for being here today. My name is William Stiles. I'll be your Redistricting Committee Chairman for this evening. I want to thank you all for being here. Like the mayor said, this is an independent board of citizens of Hendersonville, so we appreciate everybody being here today and taking the time, and appreciate Keith for taking his time and his team. Applaud you for putting all this together. This is a lot of work, and so really appreciate the planning committee for what they did, so thank you for that. So let's do a quick roll call. I'll just name everybody's name, call everybody's name out, and just say here if you're here. Pat Collins.
Here.
Timothy Johnson.
Here.
Aaron Hawkins.
Here.
Greg Mitchell.
Here.
Debbie Ruttenberg.
Here.
Wendy Slater.
Here.
Mike Tummins.
Here.
All right, wonderful. Sounds like everybody is here. Next, let's have a motion. Has everybody have time to review the agenda for today? Okay. Can we have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we're going to have Lauren review the minutes of our last meeting. Please, Ms. Lauren, if you do that.
Let me get this to you. Let's just go through the whole thing, and that way anybody watching, they kind of get a good recap of those minutes.
Sure thing. Minutes for Monday, October 4th. Chairman William Stiles called the meeting to order at 6 o'clock p.m. in the City Hall Meeting Room, 101 Maple Drive North, Hendersonville, Tennessee. Those present were Pat Collins, Aaron Hawkins, Greg Mitchell, Debbie Ruttenberg, Wendy Slattery, William Stiles, and Mike Tummins. Absent was Timothy Johnson. Also present was Mayor Jamie Clary, Keith Free, the Planning Director, and Lauren Beery, Planning Assistant. Mayor Clary welcomed the committee members and summarized the comptroller's guidelines for redistricting, and Chairman Stiles welcomed the committee members and discussed the intended discussion style. Members took time to introduce themselves and explain their reasons for serving on the committee. Director Keith Free summarized the committee's purpose and explained the Planning Department's role by direction of the committee. The committee directed staff to discuss census data to better understand the current situation. Director Free summarized the findings of the 2020 census. He stated that wards 5 and 6 have grown due to the developments along Saundersville Road and the Durham Farms area. There was discussion about the current number of aldermen. Wendy Slattery asked if Hendersonville is within a population range for 8 aldermen, or is 8 the maximum for any Tennessee municipality. Aaron Hawkins directed staff to research similar-sized cities to determine if there is a common number of aldermen or councilmen and wards/districts. Mike Tummins asked if the number of aldermen is stated in the Hendersonville City Charter, and what is the process of changing the charter. Director Free said he would need to check with the city attorney and would have that information available at the next meeting. There was discussion about allowable relevant deviation and maintaining appropriate minority representation. And then a 10-minute break was taken at 10 p.m. and discussion began again at 7:10 p.m. There was discussion about the number of wards, and then motion by Hawkins, second by Slattery to remove the discussion of 4 wards moving forward. Motion carried. Motion by Hawkins, seconded by Slattery to move forward in discussing the following count options provided they are legally possible. 6 wards with 2 aldermen per ward, 8 wards with 1 alderman per ward, 5 wards with 2 aldermen per ward. Motion carried. Motion by Hawkins, seconded by Slattery to direct planning staff to create maps using the following divisional methods: existing infrastructure, natural boundaries, particularly the Indian Lake and Sanders Walton Ferry Peninsulas, and that motion was also carried. There was discussion about scheduling the next committee meeting. Slattery asked if there were any additional constraints they should consider moving forward. Director Free said there should be no at-large districting. Otherwise, the committee should just continue to follow the comptroller's guidelines. Motion by Hawkins, seconded by Slattery to schedule the next Hendersonville Citizen Redistricting Committee meeting for Wednesday, October 20th from 6 to 9 p.m. and to tentatively schedule the following meeting for Wednesday, October 27th. Motion carried. And then motion by Ruttenberg, seconded by Collins to adjourn the meeting at 8:07 p.m. Motion carried.
Thank you, Lauren. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Thank you.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
At this time, I'd like to allow, we have a few citizens here of Hendersonville who'd like to stand up and give their presentation. Can I just have a motion to allow this since it's not in the minutes this evening? And have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Let me check with Jason. Where would be the best place? Right here at the podium? You can do it right there. And then that way. Yeah, then that way everybody can hear.
My name is Gail Haygood. I live at 135 Woodbell Drive, which is currently in Ward 2. I have lived there for 39 years. For most of those years, I lived in Ward 4. I taught 18 years at Lakeside Park Elementary, which is also in Ward 2, but on the Saunders Ferry Peninsula. And it has concerned me that my ward is got a lake in the middle of it. And when I drove here tonight, if I looked to my left, I was in Ward 2. To my right, it was Ward 4, all the way here. I turn at the four-way stop every day. I look at the Beatty Farm, it's in Ward 4. But I go home. My house is not even showing on that map right now because I live way down the peninsula. If I walk a few streets down, I'm in Ward 4. So every time I've questioned, why am I in Ward 2 now, it had to be done for population to make it even. So they just kind of scooped few of us out and put us over here in Ward 2 with the Saunders Ferry Peninsula. And Mr. Free, when I contacted the planning department, was kind enough to provide me with these figures, which I'm sure you probably have, but it was very interesting to me. The 2020 census shows Ward 2 population at 10,084. 6,526 of those people are on the Saunders Ferry side. 3,558 people are on my side, the Indian Lake Peninsula. So almost 3,000 more people in my ward live on the Saunders Ferry Peninsula. My side, the population increased 149 people since the last census. The Saunders Ferry Peninsula increased 1,445. That's a big difference. Ward 4, Ward 2 on my side will not increase. When the city thankfully purchased the Beatty Farm, that was the last area that could have been developed on that peninsula, with the exception of some buildings still in the meadows of Indian Lake. But compared to the Saunders Ferry, Walton Ferry Peninsula, where apartments are continuously being built, it's just a lot of difference between the peninsulas. And I understand the population has to be distributed evenly, but I do think consideration should be made of the physical settings, the boundaries of the wards, because having the lake to divide a ward, to me, has not been the best choice. So as you move forward with your decisions to make recommendations to the Board of Aldermen, I hope that you will consider these comments. Obviously, it doesn't concern a lot of other people. It's not an overflow crowd, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. And I don't envy your job, but I'm so glad that Mayor Clary proposed for us to have a citizens committee, because your input is important.
Thank you, Ms. Gill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just one? Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Gill, appreciate that. Okay, at this time, if there's no objections, I'd like to move to item 5, discussion items. The way I would like to do this is the same style that we did last time, so we'll have the discussion item. After each discussion item, we'll do round robin, starting with Aaron on my left, moving forward to Debbie. Aaron, you're always in the prime position. And then we'll come back around the table, 2 minutes, please, for each question or comment, and then we'll move forward. We will go back around if we need to, and Ms. Wendy has volunteered to keep time, to be our timekeeper again, so thank you, Ms. Wendy, for that. Discussion item. If we look at letter A, research from planning department and city attorney, number 1 is 8 aldermen, the maximum for a Tennessee municipality. So Keith, if you'd like to handle that, please.
Yes, and I will note that our city attorney, John Bradley, is here this evening, so I'll kind of share I'll share what my understanding is in discussion with Mr. Bradley of these particular questions, but if there's a particular item, John, that you see that maybe need further clarification or something where I'm a little awry on it, then certainly jump in on that. The first question was, is 8 aldermen the maximum for a Tennessee municipality? I'll remind everybody that we're currently grandfathered in with having 12 aldermen. When you hear of the charter, the mayor aldermanic charter, what that is, it's a state statute, basically. So it's in the state statute, and by the mayor aldermanic charter, then you're limited to 8. So if the number, of course, this body has been directed by BOMA to look at dividing what those wards are, but in the last discussion that the committee had was talking about the numbers. So looking at the numbers, if you did reduce the numbers down from below 12, the most you could do would be 8. You couldn't do 9, 10, or 11. You'd have to stay with 12, but if you did reduce it, it would have to be no more than 8. So that is a requirement once we step out of the grandfathered status that we're currently in.
We have to become compliant at that point.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes,
So let's start with Aaron. Aaron, do you have any questions?
I don't. So if I understand, you can't go to 10.
That's
It's either 12, or 8,
Or
or
below,
somewhere
yes.
below that.
That's
Okay,
correct.
That was my only question.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Debbie, any questions? Ms. Pat?
The only question would be, so either it's 8 or 12, and if we go to 8, then that is a permanent, is that correct? It cannot be changed
Yeah,
back?
yeah, you couldn't increase it later.
Right,
That's
okay.
correct, above that.
Right, okay.
Mr. Johnson?
So we can completely disregard the proposed 5-ward map at this point?
Well, the way I understand it is you could still have a 5-ward map, however, it would have to be 5 representatives.
Right, okay.
Yes.
But I
If you
think
wanted
it
to
was
be-
with 10, correct?
Correct.
Wasn't that the original intent?
Correct.
5 with 10?
Yes,
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's correct.
yep. Mr. Mitchell?
No comments.
Slattery?
Nothing.
No.
Okay. Let's move on to the second question. Number of alderman wards of other similarly sized cities.
If you'll look on the maps, and I just will note that we've got J.P. Finnegan. He's a new employee here with the city, and he's our GIS specialist. And so all the maps and the work that you've got in before you, he did all of this. And then the planning staff, Caitlin Shin, she's not here this evening, but she prepared, if you'll look on the back, this chart. And do we have that chart up there? It should be a PDF somewhere. Yeah, we'll be able to pull it up here in a minute. But this chart is a review of comparable cities and cities in Middle Tennessee. And looking at it, you can see that no other city has the number of aldermen that we do, 12. The closest would be Jackson, that has 9, and then the city of Spring Hill, which has 8. When you look at the number of wards, then we currently have 6 wards, and you can see there, the city of Lebanon, the city has 6, also has 6. The city of Jackson has 9 wards, but other than that, all the other communities have a lower number of wards. Also, one of the things that was discussion at the last meeting was how many, in comparable cities, how many people are each elected person representing. And you can see that under the number of population per alderman. You can see that currently, under our current population with 6 wards and 12 aldermen, with 2 aldermen per ward, you can see that the average would be 5,146 per alderman. You can see that is actually, out of all of the peer comparable communities, that is the smallest amount on doing that. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of just comparability. I will remind you, as I did in the last meeting, that it is good to compare and see what other communities do, but the number of wards, aldermen, number of aldermen per ward, and how many they have representing is something that worked for their community, and it's certainly good for us to look at. But in this whole process, there isn't an idea community that, hey, we want to duplicate exactly what they did. but it's very good to take this information into account in making your recommendation.
Thank you, Keith. Mr. Aaron?
And I really do appreciate you putting all this together. It was
And you
fantastic
bet.
information, and I've been through every page of it. And I did ask because, just when you buy a house, you look at comps, right?
Right.
It's not that you're buying that house, but you want to see what comparable, and I'm not saying that we should run our cities like these, because I like Hendersonville, and I like how Hendersonville functions. But these are just comps. And so I really do appreciate that, because in my world, it comes down to the numbers.
Yes, sir.
Any questions or anything, though?
I don't have any
Oh,
questions.
okay,
Thank
all
you.
right. Ms. Debbie?
No.
No, okay. Ms. Pat?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
Just one question. Do we know whether, and all of the comparables are full-time versus part-time, or, because our aldermen are part-time, correct?
That's correct.
Do we know whether these comparables are all part-time also?
No, we did not obtain that information. It would be a good estimation that the majority of these would be part-time aldermen.
I'd say all of them are
So-
part-time. I don't know of any city in the
Yeah.
state that would not be true.
It'd be very rare, but we did not check that information.
Any other questions, Mr. Johnson?
No.
Okay, all right. Mr. Mitchell? No. Slattery?
No, I'm good.
Not right
Mr.
now,
Simmons?
no.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Does the charter specify total number of aldermen?
Yes, and this may be something that I may need Mr. Bradley to weigh in on as well, is actually the city charter that we're working on is the form of government that we currently have, which did establish this. And then since that time, then the state statutes have changed, and there's different requirements for newly incorporated cities or cities that might change from their grandfathered status. But currently, I think with the current situation that we have, it is 12. And I might ask Mr. Bradley if he could, to just double check that to make sure that.
Mr. Bradley, if you want to come up to the microphone.
So far as I know, Hendersonville is the only city under the mayor automatic charter that has 12 aldermen. And in 1991, partly because of Hendersonville and the fact that the council was so large after a referendum in 1986, the legislature changed the number of aldermen you could have to have a maximum of 8, and says that if Hendersonville, really is the only one I know that this would even apply to, that if Hendersonville changes, that the maximum then becomes 8 for them like everyone else. The minimum's 2, which of course wouldn't make sense for a town this size. It'd be sort of like having 3 mayors. But that's it was really because of Hendersonville that change was made. So 8 is the maximum now. And just one thing that just to correct, because I've been here forever, is that Ward 4 and 2 were split by that lake split for Ward 2 happened in 2001. So most of Ms. Haygood's life, she's lived in Ward 2, but, because most of its city has been in Ward 2. She's been 20 years in Ward 2 and was, I don't know, 10 years before that maybe in Ward 4. Not that that's important, and y'all need to decide, your mission is to draw the lines. And one thing, I know it's interesting to talk about the number of wards, but an alderman suggested that the committee consider that, and the board specifically voted against changing the number of wards by this committee. That doesn't mean that something won't come out of this committee that looked like a good idea. And I certainly don't want to discourage anybody from considering that number of changing, because we are a sort of a unicorn to have 12. I think, as Keith said, Jackson's the only city that's even got as many as 9. It's very unusual. Metro Nashville has 40, council people, but that's an odd compromise that was made when they adopted the consolidated city-county form of government. And that's, we're not Metro Nashville. We don't want to be. So long-range thinking, I think that most people, I got an alderman and a mayor here, would agree that it might be a good idea to have fewer than 12, but that's not something that can be done quickly. But you ask how to do it, it can be done by ordinance. And there's nothing that requires the council to change it. I mean, it could change to 8 and then to 6, I guess, if they wanted to, because there's no limitation except that. Minimum 2, maximum 8 if we change from 12. Any other questions about that?
Well, just stay right there for just
Okay.
a second, okay? Keith, anything else you wanted to add?
No,
Okay.
and I think it's good to hear Mr. Bradley's insight as to the uniqueness of our community and kind of where we are in that whole charter.
Keith, I wanted to say one more thing about that. The reason we went to 12, in my opinion, I was not involved in the referendum per se, as the call for that election, but we had, up until 1986, we had the city commission, city manager form of government. And we had 5 commission members, and they elected one of their own to be mayor. So you didn't have a full-time mayor. You had a city manager that managed the city then. And in 1986, this town voted by a 2-to-1 vote to change from that to the Board of Mayor and Alderman charter. And the reason they chose this charter, because that was the only charter they could change to, since they already had the city commission charter at that time. Other cities, and one thing that's really confusing, other cities like Gallatin, Portland, Westmoreland, they all have private act charters where they can change these things however they want to with the legislature's approval. That changed in 1951. You can't have any more cities with private act charters. So Hendersonville's been a city since 1969, so that's not an option. When we change the mayor aldermanic charter, or when the legislature changes it, I should say, they change it for over 100 cities. So that's why, I mean, we're, like I said, we're the odd one in that being we're the largest by far that has this form of government. So, but that's the history of how we got here. We went from 5 to 12. And I think, and the mayor's done a lot of research on the history of this, I think he would agree that one of the concerns was to have representation from different parts of the city instead of having it concentrated from one part, which I think in large measure for many years that was the case with the city commission form. So that's how they came up with the idea of wards. I'm not sure how they picked, 6 over 5 or 4, but that's what they came up with 2 from each ward. And it's worked for a long time, hasn't it, Mr. Waters?
All right, thank you, Mr. Bradley. Let's move on for any discussion or questions. Hold on just a second. Hold on just a second. Stay right there. All right, we'll start with Mr. Hawkins.
So, you said that Bowman voted and said, we're just gonna redraw the lines. So, I think the intent of the board is to maybe stick to the 6 wards, but also provide a recommendation, to facilitate future growth and, maybe right sizing, maybe not to be decided by this.
Right.
But is that a fool's errand, or is that?
Well, it's outside of the call. We have an ordinance that says that when we have a special committee, it has to be established by ordinance, and we have to say specifically what they're going to do. And I mean, each of you is going to have your opinion about the number of wards. I know I do. I'm sure the mayor does, and Mr. Waters does, and we all do. But for right now, I think the reason for this, one of the reasons is we're under time pressure because of the election. The election office they need to be able to send out voter registration cards with people's ward numbers by December because of the May county primary, not because of the city election. We've got till November on that. I mean, we would have time to change. Put it this way, if the city chose to, after you draw the 6 lines, if the city wanted to change the number of wards even before the 2022 elections, they could. It's just that it'd be hard to do, not only changing the lines, but the wards with this committee. So I'm just trying to make your job a little bit simpler, although I know you're going to have an opinion about all that in the meantime.
Okay,
Just as
thank
I
you.
do.
Any other questions?
None. Thank you.
Okay, you good?
No questions.
Okay. Ms. Davies, no questions. Ms. Collins, no. Mr. Johnson? No. Mr. Mitchell?
Is the
Yeah.
8 alderman population driven, or
No.
doesn't matter the size of your community? Okay.
It's just that they made a determination that with this charter that 8, that 8's just the most you should have.
Okay.
And that's, like I said, I think part of that was because of the first 5 years' experience of Hendersonville with 12.
I understand.
Because it's a lot harder to get consensus with 7 people than it is for 4, typically.
Okay. All right, good. That's a good question. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Good. All right, let's move on to the next one. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. You can, Mr. Bradley, you're good.
One thing too that's different about these other charters, and I think it's important to point out, under our charter, unlike these other charters, our mayor has a vote, just like he's a member of the legislative body. So that's another reason it's kind of odd that we need to have an even number of aldermen, because the mayor has a vote. He doesn't have a veto, but he has a vote. And it wasn't like that with the city commission form of government. So I think that's something to keep in mind as to why we have the number that we have.
Yeah, so just for clarification, if we did decide to change anything as far as representatives, it would have to be an even number.
It wouldn't need
Yeah,
to.
okay.
It wouldn't have to be, but it would certainly make life simpler for you.
No, we wouldn't want to do anything like that. Okay, moving on to the next question. Process for changing the city charter.
As Mr. Bradley was talking about, it is an ordinance, so changing the number of wards and where the ward boundaries are going to be.
Okay, but changing the city charter requires the legislature.
Well, yeah, changing the mayor to the mayor aldermanic, to go out of the grandfathered status that we're in right now and go into what's defined by the state legislator with the mayor aldermanic charter, then you would have to go by all of those things. And then those could be done just by an ordinance. And an ordinance would be a first reading and then a second meeting that would have a public hearing and a second reading. So it would take 2 meetings at BOMA with a public hearing on that second to change the wards where they're located, the number of wards, and the number of aldermen. So that's basically what it is, what you could do.
One other thing there, it takes a 2/3 vote also to change the number. So that's sort of a supermajority, which is, sometimes it's hard to get 7 sometimes, Mr. Waters.
Okay.
You're right.
All right, thank you, Keith.
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
No questions.
Okay.
No.
Ms. Ruttenberg?
No questions.
Ms. Collins?
No questions.
Mr. Johnson?
No question.
Mr. Mitchell?
None.
Ms. Slattery?
None.
No, sir.
Nope.
And I
Okay.
will, and I will just mention, because Mr. Bradley was off mic there, just for folks listening, that what Mr. Bradley was pointing out, that when an ordinance is done, especially for what we're talking about, it would require a 2/3 majority at BOMA, just so everybody is aware of that.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
We got a high five and a thumbs up from the booth, so thank you for clarifying that for us. Let's move on to question number 5, process for changing the number of aldermen. I think we've pretty much already done that, but Keith, I mean,
the
anything you
same.
want to add there?
It's the same process, and then also that's 6, so they could be done simultaneously. That's a lot. That's a lot for BOMA to do simultaneously, but it's possible.
Okay.
But that's a lot of change to occur within a very short time frame that we're in.
And that's
But it's
question
possible.
number 6, can a change to the charter and the redistricting occur simultaneously? And
Yes,
you're saying it can, but it would be a process.
Yes, and noting the charter, we're just talking about to meet state statutes, not going back to the legislator for them to do anything.
And one thing there, and you can repeat what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The redistricting lines require 7 votes. To change the number would require 9. So that's you might point that out.
Yes, Mr. Bradley was saying that changing the lines for the wards would require a majority, which would be 7 votes, but to change the number of aldermen, that would require the supermajority of 2/3 vote, which would be a vote of 9 out of the 13. Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
Before we move on to, I think that finishes discussion item number, or letter A, research for planning department of city attorney. Before we go to B, redistrict map option using existing infrastructure and natural boundaries, I'd like to just have a discussion if there's any follow-up questions. Mr. Hawkins?
None.
Okay. Ms. Ruttenberg? Ms. Collins?
None.
Mr. Johnson?
None.
Mr. Mitchell?
None.
Ms. Slattery?
No. Thank you.
Mr. Timmons?
On 6, it said, you said it could be a daunting task to do both simultaneously. Can you do one now and then one in December and still get into the election commission?
Yeah, the thing for the election commission isn't necessarily dealing with the number of aldermen. It's dealing with establishing where those ward boundaries are. So that has to be within this very short timeline. It's very possible, you could do both together, but it's very possible you could establish the wards and we meet the timeline and BOMA gets everything taken care of before the end of the year, gets that to the election commission, and then BOMA wants to revisit in March, April, June. It would have to be prior to the next election for city offices, which I think wouldn't be until next November.
It would, and the qualified deadline would be August. So if the city
Yeah.
wanted to change it, they'd have from January through
Yeah.
June, basically.
They'd have January through June because August is when you've got to file for local office, because there's not primaries. So you would have that period of time. So you could get the wards done by the end of the year, and then the number could be revisited anytime between November through April or June. June would be kind of pushing it, but during that time period, then the BOMA could take that up and say, hey, we want to look at doing something different with the number of aldermen. So that's very, very possible to do that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Yes.
Going back to what the election commission has to do, the lines, what we would do, you said it doesn't have anything to really do with the wards. It has to do where the citizens are living within that ward. And if it changes, then we have to notify the citizens that they are no longer in the ward
Right.
that they're currently living.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the issue, because the election commission has to notify the citizens about that. And not only that, those future candidates who pull to petition, if it's not within their ward, they also have to know, are they in the ward that they're going to possibly run
Right.
for? So those are things that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And that's the deadline that is pushed on us to get that, the office has to take care of.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Collins. That's a good point. Thank you very much.
And there are other issues, and we don't want to get bogged down with this there, and it would be something BOMA at such time, which could be next year, if they wanted to visit reducing the number of aldermen, then they would also come out with a workout plan of tearing down how long somebody, if you're already elected, you're going to serve your time out, but there'd have to be some kind of plan to figure how it works itself out over the next couple of years. So, but that would be something BOMA would have to do as a part of that as well.
Without any further discussion on letter A, let's move on to letter B, redistrict map options using existing infrastructure and natural boundaries. So number one is 6 wards. Keith, if you would like to pull that up. JP, if you want to pull up 6 wards.
We created a six-ward map, and everybody's got a copy of that in front of them. JP's going to pull this up, and I just might mention again, I mentioned it last time, but everything, we have the capability to do everything fully interactively. If there's a line we wanted to change, we can change it, and make sure that the idea population is evenly distributed. We can do all that in real time here this evening. And depending on how things move through the evening, there will be a point where if you focus down on one recommendation, we know what that is, we can have a break, we can print off those maps, and then reconvene to go focus back over there. So everything that you're seeing up here, we can manipulate any of the lines and then know exactly how it's changing the population and everything. In looking at the 6 wards, one of the specific directions that the committee gave the staff was to look at trying to get rid of what the Ms. Gail was speaking to earlier, is not to have Ward 2 separated, by the lake. And so what you see in this configuration is what the planning staff has come up with in order to maintain 6 wards. It does change some things because, as we know, overall, our population has increased more than 10,000. So there's a lot of movement that has to happen, especially in the peninsulas, to accommodate that within the ward boundaries. What this does is it takes basically Ward 2 and pushes it up into the yellow area of what we're calling Ward 4. And keep in mind, these numbers are just numbers that could all be renumbered to something else. But just for representation purposes, we're referring to that yellow area as Ward 4. And then kind of what we did is, one of the things, we looked at the geographical features of the lake, tried to get rid of this separation of Ward 2 that was occurring, and this is what we came up with. And one of the things that we did is we went in the bottom of where you see Ward 1 and Ward 2 at the tip of the peninsulas. So we basically started working our way back up to get that idea population of, I think it's 10,000 something, that I can't remember the number, but it's 10,007.
292.
10,292.
Was the idea.
And we did that from the peninsulas up, and then we went over to Ward 5 in the blue area to the right. And we went to the furthest extent there and then just worked our way back till we got the population. Did the same thing with the north in Ward 6 by Durham Farms and just pushed it down until we got the population. And the same thing over in the green area that says Ward 3, Ward 3 at Mansker Farms, and then just pushed that down. And then, had to adjust where they all met and look for natural barriers to break those. And that's kind of the methodology that we looked at as we looked at this. None of this took into account the location of existing aldermen. That just wasn't anything that we looked at. Of course, I know where they all are, but that wasn't taken into account in the creation of this map. And I can answer any questions. We can zoom into any specific area that you wanted to dive into a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. So just to clarify, this is 6 wards, a map of 6 wards, spread out equally with about 12,500 population, roughly 12,200, something around there, per ward. And this is retaining 2 representatives per ward, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well,
No,
it's
it's
10,000.
10,000.
It's
10,000.
What did I say?
12,000.
Oh, 10,781.
But it doesn't
sorry.
take into account number of
No.
aldermen. This is just number of wards.
yeah, this is
Yeah,
just the
right.
number.
But we're saying that this would be 2 representatives per ward.
No, I don't think we've gotten
We
to
haven't,
that
we
yet.
haven't
Gotten
gotten to
there.
that.
Okay,
This
all
is
right.
just, this is
How
just,
many
the-
wards?
this is
How
just
many
the boundaries.
wards?
This is just the boundaries.
All right, perfect. Okay, so let's have a discussion. Mr. Hawkins.
I would like to see a couple of things, just because physical boundaries, to Ms. Gale's comments, we still have a separation in, what is it, Ward 1? If we could lop the side off and move it so that we isolated that, and again,
Yes.
this may throw all the population out, but again, we get ourselves into this, we have a ward split by the lake. And
Right.
if we could do something about that, just to make it a natural boundary, that, if we can do it in real time, and it says,
Yeah.
okay, this one now has 16,000, this one has 7.
Right.
You
We
throw that out.
I'd like to, that's a great question. So I'd like to go around the room, get everybody's ideas, and then we could go back to JP so he's not doing this with each person. So we could have a couple options here or there, okay, JP, you follow what I'm saying? So if you got it, if you want to write down, okay, Mr. Hawkins has this idea,
Got
and
it.
so we can, okay, that way we're not going back and forth, okay?
We'll
So-
do it all at the end.
Yeah, we'll do it all at the end. All right. Mr. Hawkins, any other questions or comments on that?
None, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so you got that, JP?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, all right.
I do have one more.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
And there's really nothing we can do with Ward 4, because you built the population from the lake up, so that's completely understandable. So, you can't cut and paste in from there, so.
Okay. Ms. Ruttenberg?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, all right. Ms. Collins?
Just so I'm in my brain, I'm looking at this correctly. So what we have here on the map is the Ward 1 and Ward 2 are touching. So the way that it shows, yes, right there, the boundaries have purged in not to show the lake. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Between-
correct.
Between the two, is what we're seeing right now. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. They meet in the middle of the lake.
Right,
really,
that's,
yeah.
right.
Well, the
And
lake is
blind
there.
line-
The lake is,
Yeah, let's zoom in on that a little bit more, JP. Yes, sir. There you go.
Right, okay.
Yep.
That's all I'm going to make sure that's
Yes.
what I was seeing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then that's all I needed to know.
Okay.
You're seeing it right.
All right, Mr. Johnson?
Okay, on our proposed map, we have Ward 4 as the Indian Lake Peninsula, but now that's actually Ward 2.
Well, and those numbers can change. That's
Okay.
just,
you just numbered
Well, I
them.
just don't want to.
Yeah, yes,
So I just
yeah.
don't want to be confusing when I'm talking about which
Yes.
ward. So if that's going to be Ward 2, and then Ward 4 is the yellow,
yes.
okay. So it's my understanding that the law requires a deviation range of less than 10% to comply,
Yes, sir.
correct? So I really like what you guys have brought forth to us so far, and the only suggestion I would make, maybe to allow for the growth of wards 5, 6, and 3 would be to load up wards now I'm confused, 2 and 4 and 1 with a higher, or put them at the top end of the deviation range and have wards 3, 5, and 6 at the lower end of the deviation range. Right now, I think wards 5 and 6, as we have this proposed map right now, are actually are higher than Ward 4 as far as population, as well as Ward 2. So if we can pull from wards 4 and 5 into Ward 4, and then pull some of Ward 4 into Ward 2,
I
the
got you.
Indian Lake Peninsula, that would build up 1, 2, and 4, which
Yeah, I
would
got
allow
you.
for growth in 5, 6, and 3.
Yes,
Okay?
yes.
That's a great
And we can go 10%, but I think it would be best not to have it go beyond 5%. But you can go 10%, but it's not a rule, but it's just, but, not getting much over 5%. And that's a deviation between the highest and the lowest. So it'd be like whichever, if you had a -1 and you
Right.
had a 4,
Yeah.
then that, that would be what that
Yeah,
would be
Keith, on
considered.
page 2, you have it there with the different deviations, I
Yes.
think. Okay, yeah.
Yes,
Well, I
but
thought
I
we
think we can adjust that.
Adjust it.
We can do that here this evening.
To account for the growth in 5, 6, and 3.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Mitchell.
Nothing.
Okay, Ms. Slattery.
Couple of things. To your point, I understand the logic, absolutely. That you're maxed out on the two peninsulas, basically.
Yeah.
As you pointed out, there's really not much more room for growth, except on Sanders Ferry. But we also agreed last time that we were going to deal with the numbers that were in front of us. And we can't anticipate what the growth can be. You can make some fairly logical assumptions, but I think we agreed as a group that we were not going to use anything other than the numbers in front of us, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
That's correct.
So wanted to clarify that. And then on the map, I don't know how to do this other than to hold it up. So I'll hold it up for JP so he can see it. What's labeled as Ward 6 on the 6-ward plan in the orange color. This little tail down here, above the green Ward 3 on this map, almost seems to not meet the requirement of being compact. It seems to be dangling out there just a little bit between two areas of the green, what is Ward 3 on this map. So I wonder if there's a way to take that tail out of Ward 6 and do something with it.
Yes, and we will do that when we're making these other adjustments. And that was a challenge, and we kept moving back and forth because we had it in the green, but what we kept finding is then it totally messed up. Everything south
Sure.
of it.
You can't
But,
touch one thing
yeah.
without it.
And
But
so,
I
yeah.
do want to explore that.
We can do
And
that.
just a process question from my own understanding, Keith, when you're doing this, neighborhoods are maintained as whole, or do you sometimes divide neighborhoods?
We do have a neighborhood overlay, and we looked at that when we created that. And some of these lines were us trying to keep big neighborhoods together, but some very small neighborhoods, there was no way to keep them together because the way the block groups were, and that we were already maxed out on some of the population. But for most of all of the larger to mid-sized neighborhoods, we were able to keep most of those intact.
Okay.
So we did look at that because we didn't want a situation, especially for a large neighborhood, to be split down the middle or, third of it to be in another thing. So we did do that, and so when we make these adjustments, it's very possible we're going to reverse that correction.
Okay.
But we can throw an overlay and see what happens
Okay,
with that
Good
to see.
question.
But that's a very good question.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Tubbins.
I also agree that all we have to go on is the 2020 population that we have. We can't anticipate growth, and, we know which wards are going to grow probably more than others, but that's for the group in 10 years to redistrict those lines after that growth occurs. So that's all I have to say on that.
Okay. All right, Keith,
Yep.
let's,
Ready. I think we can do it.
you ready?
Yeah, we can do it. I'm gonna go up here. I'll turn it. Did you have something? I may refer to you on something. Okay, we can
All
do
right,
it.
okay.
All right.
let me know what you want to see first, Keith.
Okay. Let's do the simplest thing first. Let's take that Ward 6 tail over there by 5. Yes, sir. Yeah, let's take this and let's put that into Ward 3. All the way, probably let's just go all the way to Glenbrook right here.
Okay.
Or Glenbrook, New Shackle Island.
Yep.
And let's widen that out so we can take a look at that and just see, yes. So that does look, it does look good, and we agree. When we looked at it, it was like, yeah, that's it. Now, what is Ward 3? How much are we over now?
Right now, we are at 11,531,
Okay, so we're,
Right at the 10.
about 1,200 over.
yeah, what is the percentage of our deviation? Okay.
I just have total
Oh, that's
population
okay. That's
deviation
okay.
currently.
Yeah, so we definitely got to shed. Now we've got to shed something.
What did it do to Ward 6? Can we scroll
Yeah,
down
let's
and
look at
see the
Ward 6.
Can you
population?
pull Ward 6 over to New Shackle Island? Is that just too high of a population area? See with that right there? Yeah, pull that to New Shackle Island.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because there's no neighborhoods that cross that, to my knowledge, I don't think.
That cross New
Yes.
They
Shackle?
cross New Shackle,
We're
no.
currently, right now, before we made the change, we were 1,300 off, and then,
What does that do?
there we go, we're good, we're right at 10,000, so we're right in there, in the sweet spot.
JP, zoom out one more time, thank you.
So now the really scary stuff is looking at Ward 4 and how it,
Yeah.
it can be changed.
Is there any way to remove the ward boundaries from the lake, just so we can see the peninsula cut?
The block group, I think, goes all the way, JP, to the lake, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can unassign
Just
them
because
if
on
you'd
these
like.
maps, you
Yeah.
can see the lake.
Yeah.
Hold on
very
just a
distinct.
second.
Yeah, what you're dealing with right now, this is what the comptroller's office has,
Okay.
that we're building it. The pretty maps you've got is what we take and make it pretty.
Oh, there you go. So
Oh,
you got it.
yeah.
Look at that.
There you go.
JP.
So are we proposing taking what's been Ward 4 forever and calling it Ward 2?
No.
No, no,
No,
no.
We
no,
just,
no.
I mean,
No
just for
numbers.
simplicity then, would it be okay if we switch those words, those back, so when we talk about
Yes, I
Ward
can,
4,
I just
where
had
it says
those
Ward 4
numerically
there?
wrong
Is that
labeled.
okay?
It wasn't,
For simplicity's
they were just
sake?
labeled incorrectly. That was my fault.
Okay,
Yeah.
JP said he'll fix that for us. So
Okay.
thank you, JP.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for doing that
Yeah.
late, man.
Yep,
That's
no
great.
problem.
Thank you very
And
much.
it's so, and kind of what we're doing here, yeah, kind of what we're doing here, this is exactly how we can do it and interactively. So this is exactly what you're doing, just, this is good. We can keep working with it.
All
like
right, so
that.
before moving forward, let's just see if there's any discussion. Mr. Hawkins?
I like that natural boundary.
Okay.
My one question would be, and now he's gonna send me on a moving target here because he's changing but Ward 1 with that tail, again, from a
Yeah.
compactness, yep. that
Okay.
Up, and
Hold on just a second, JP. Go ahead and finish your thought, Mr. Hawkins.
I don't know if I can finish that thought.
Okay.
Are you thinking it goes into 3?
Yeah, but again, then you're gonna have to readjust 3 because 3's already kind of maxed out, right?
If-
So.
Okay.
It could take a
Because
little.
what I'm saying is you still have Ward 2 that is still split by the lake.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
we've kind of violated our direction to say, okay, let's see if we can't
Yep.
make the physical boundaries.
Yep.
So I was trying to get Ward 4 to accommodate maybe that little piece and then, I don't know, not split. I don't think there's probably a way to do the
Yeah.
not split, but at least that little tail dripping down from Ward 2 into Ward 4, I don't know what that is, yeah. I mean, because I understand it's by neighborhood, and I understand that it goes population-wise, but if we could have a kind of contiguous
Yeah.
set.
And one
Okay,
thing
Ms.
one thing I might mention, the item that we were talking about the big growth that's gonna happen in 5 and 6 in the north, and then kind of, giving a little bit more room for growth on that. really what's going to happen is we're going to grow by 10,000 in the next 10 years. But what's going to happen is exactly what's happening now, is the peninsula wards are going to have to get a little bit bigger. So they're not going to stay static, because as we grow, then all the things change. Actually, what happens is some of the areas in 5 and 6 will go to other wards because they've grown so much, and then to get the equal distribution.
And to Mr. Tubman's point, in 10 years, they'll have to revisit where
Yeah.
the census lies. But,
Yeah, exactly.
our charge is to make sure that we have something continuous and compact.
Let's see, JP, real quick, where are we at on the target? Yeah, right there in the target development. Yeah, it looks like we're
Real close.
we're real close right there.
Let me get around to everybody's discussion
Okay.
questions, and then we'll come back to the next topic that we brought up, Keith. So, Ms. Ruttenberg.
I think, I agree with my colleague here that the tail from Ward 2 on the right-hand side of Drake's Creek, I don't know what that is. Is there a,
What it is it's a block group that just goes down through there. And so,
so
like all
that's a
these.
neighborhood?
Yeah, well, it's a census tract block group. And so we're doing it by block group. And some of these have that one over here to the east. They have these weird things that go further. Just,
That block probably starts at Gallatin Road, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what, can you highlight that little snake and show them what that whole block group looks like? No, this one right here. Yeah,
You'll have
that one.
one side voting one way,
The
then the
small
other.
intestine here.
There's not a road in there.
Yeah, just to show them what that whole block group, how big it is. I mean, it's not big population-wise, but
Yeah.
geographically, it's kind of odd. And see, that's what the size of that is. Yeah, see where it is blue?
Oh, so we either
Yeah,
have
It
a tail
goes-
coming down or.
But
So
there's
it's gonna
no
be a
way-
tail down or a tail
There's no way to
up.
break it up.
Okay.
I understand. And then,
Yeah.
I wonder, at what point how do we adjust for diversity? How can we look at diversity in these groups? That's one of the things that we were going to discuss, and I don't want to jump ahead.
Let's do this. Let's get to something on this 6th ward that everybody's kind of good with, and then we'll pull up the demographics and just make sure. I'm pretty sure we're going to be okay. Any of these combinations or movements, but we're going to check it and make sure. But we'll look at that
That's
when
a
we
good
kind of
thought.
nail it down.
Yeah, let's hold that thought. We'll get around to everybody's discussion questions, and then once we get the map kind of to what it needs to be, then we'll follow up with those demographics. So, Ms. Collins, did you have any discussion or questions?
No.
No? Okay. Mr. Johnson?
Not this moment.
Mr. Mitchell?
No.
Ms. Slattery?
I'm still struggling with what is labeled as Ward 2 sitting across the lake, but I think there's no way to make a move that big without just destroying everything. I think it's just the nature of the beast, so no.
JP, how much do we have left in Ward 3 that we could increase it? I mean, we could go up a little bit, but then we're gonna, can you zoom in there? Then we're gonna get across,
Yeah.
that's the railroad track, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, then we're gonna get down into.
And I think even if you
To
pick that up into Ward 3, it's not equal to what we would try to pick up in what is labeled as Ward 2.
No, you're right. You're
There's
right.
not enough.
And if talking about this in a common sense, if you're talking about tip of peninsula, you're talking about a 30-minute drive. These people are still neighbors, around that bend. They're still, I think, would be considered neighbors as opposed to tip of peninsula to tip of peninsula. I think that knowing that area.
I think it's the lesser of
The two
two
evils.
evils.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, is I think Ward 2, as it's laid out now, I think they all have a common community interest because they all are adjacent to or right next to Main Street / Gallatin Road, where all the commercial district is. So I think that actually works out well to have Ward 2 kind of follow Main Street, even though there's a lake that,
Yeah.
cuts through, but they have a common interest because of Main Street.
And that's a great point,
That's a
Mr.
good
Johnson, is that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that there's commonalities between the wards, so that's a great point.
Let's zoom in there.
Real
I
quick,
wanna see.
Mr. Tummons, did you have any questions or?
Yeah, I'm still just confused on the little finger that goes into Ward 4, because that's Cherokee Road. And so you have one row of houses on one side, and that's basically going to be into Ward 2, if I'm correct. There's no way to,
So, Mr. Free, are we hemmed into the software, or can we make a line that says, okay,
Yeah, I don't,
okay, that was my
so
question.
it's got
I
to be.
think we could do it, but we can't.
Boundary like a
we can't
road.
do
Either
it.
gotta be Ward 4 going
Yeah,
up?
we
or it's
can't
gotta
do
be
it and
Ward 2
calculate the
coming down.
the
It's
demographics.
a block.
Okay,
You
I
can't
didn't
Yeah.
know if it was a limitation of the software, if
If
it
they
was a
make
census
this
block that.
purple, then it
Yeah.
goes
Painted us
purple
there.
all the way
It's
up to
the,
Main
it's the
Street.
census block. There may be a possible way with the comptroller, we could draw a line, but it's going to,
You're splitting.
not that it's be a big
Yeah,
deal, because it'd be so small of a data of information, but it will dilute the actual demographic information.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Mr. Tummons?
Yes.
You can't, okay,
I understand.
okay. All right, good deal. Okay, Mr. Free, if you want to go to the next scenario.
Yes, can you zoom back out? Let me just see if there was, did we want to look at the demographics of this one?
Yes.
Before we
Yeah,
go to-
please, yeah, please.
Let's look at those, just to make sure everything's
Do you want me to
okay
make
with
like
that.
a separate table report, or do you want it just live like this?
Live like that's fine.
Okay. Then this would be,
I don't know, we may need a separate table, that's a little hard to,
Put percentages up there.
yeah. And then I might note that, like these areas up here, there's a couple of areas that since 2019, that the city has annexed, that is not represented on here, and we did note those. So that will be something, whatever the eventual recommendation is, we will need to make sure it's clear where those go. I think they're pretty clear. I don't think any of them will be right on the edge of anything, but we'll just need to make sure of that to make it clear. Yes, Jason? Okay, this is all the information. Let me see. Let's start here with Ward number 1, when it gets that. Yeah, we'll see that. Thank you. All right. We'll start here. This is Ward number 1, this top information, total population, 10,781. It doesn't matter, but the voting population is 8,461. The deviation is 4.75%. You can see the percentages. Where are the percentages? Okay, you're not going to see the, yeah, there it is, the percentages. So 5.9, okay. Hispanic, okay. Those are within, hold on just a second, the white, non-Hispanic white, okay, so yeah, non-Hispanic white is 79%. Let's look at Ward 2. And then let me know if you want to dive into any of the minority population. Ward 2, can you go up just a little bit? Yeah, Ward 2 has 10,141, a deviation of negative 1.4%, so that's not bad. And let's look at the demographic. The non-Hispanic white population is 68.3%. So there is a little higher minority population within this census tract.
No, you're down one. I
Down
think he's
one.
looking at Ward 3.
Oh,
That's Ward 2.
yeah,
at the
Ward
very
3.
top.
Yeah, down with your hand. Yeah, right here, yeah.
But I think it's worth pointing out where we exist today. right? And so
Yes.
the white population with the statistics that were quoted at the last meeting was Ward 3 is 67%.
Yes.
Non-Hispanic white. So
Right.
I mean, you're not moving people,
No.
right? You're moving small percentages.
Right, right. So not a significant percentage change, but there is a high percentage of non-Hispanic black that's here on the chart, 15.63% as compared to Ward 2 and probably might be to these other wards. Let's look at Ward 4, has 10,114 people, real close, just -6 off, so it's less than 1% from the standard deviation. And it looks like non-Hispanic white is 85%. So there is a lower minority population within this census tract as compared to others, but not double digits. I don't think, no. And then on Ward number 5, that's 10,286, real close, less than 1% there of standard deviation. The non-Hispanic white population is 78.68%. Looks like very comparable minority populations to most of the other wards. And let's look at the final ward, Ward number 6. And that's 10,002 persons. That one is about 2.8% below what the ideal population would be. And the non-Hispanic white population is a total of 75%, with total Hispanic population of 9.28 and a non-Hispanic black population of 9%. So the range between these aren't great. There are differences between the wards, but not, 20% or,
Hey, Mr. Free,
18%.
let's take 5 minutes for discussion, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, okay? We're trying to keep on schedule here. So the discussion will be about the current wards as they've been arranged by the planning committee and
We'll go back to the map.
the minority representation in those wards. So we'll start with Mr. Hawkins.
I know that we changed some lines but I did do some quick calculations based on what we were presented before. And the current ward, the current high-low was very, very, very close. The very high-low cultural mix was very, very close between the two. So I would have been disheartened to see if there was a massive shift one way or the other, but, it was 1%.
Okay. All right, good. Ms. Ruttenberg?
No questions.
No questions. Ms. Collins? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Mitchell? Ms. Slattery?
Nope, good.
Okay, great. So let's take a 10-minute break for a bathroom break, and then we'll come back and we'll have any other changes we need to make to this, and
Yes.
then we'll move on to the number 2, 8 wards.
Okay.
Okay?
We're going to do Ward
JP.
We're going to the eight.
I know, right? That's the biggest rivalry, Green Bay and
And you get a
Chicago.
lot of the staff come
So-
back year after year.
Right, year after year. And then
But
they
I have
got-
neighbors that are from Chicago
That's
area,
even
so we had a big, we had,
Yeah, when you have staff.
we had
come
had it
back
this
year after
weekend,
year.
so it was, I was glad to come out on the winning side though, so.
Okay, let's call the meeting back to the order. Mr. Bradley is leaving, he's getting ready to step out, and so, is there any questions? I'll just leave it up in the air. Any questions for the city attorney before he steps out? No show of hands. Thank you, Mr. Bradley, appreciate it. Thank
He
you.
can call me if he needs to.
Okay, all right, perfect, thank you.
All right,
Are we good? Okay, yeah.
do you want to clean up this math on this before we?
Yeah, so, Wendy, which one was that, Wendy?
There's two of them, actually. It's Gallatin and Cleveland.
So
And
Wendy
it's the
had,
back page of any of the maps.
JP, something maybe you can look into this. So review of comparable cities, Alderman wards. I'll just let Ms. Slater, if you want to,
Okay, if you look at Gallatin, the number of wards is 5. It's listed as having 2 aldermen per ward, which would put them at 10, plus 2 at-large members, which would put them at 12. And William redid the formula and made it work. Is it possible that it's 5 wards, 1 alderman per ward, 2 at-large for a total of 7?
I'm just assuming that's just a
I
typo.
believe that is the case. JP didn't do that.
Oh, okay.
I believe that is the case. It's different. There is something different about it, but I believe that,
It's just that the numbers didn't work.
Yes.
They have 7 aldermen, and they have 2 per, and they have 5 wards, that's 10 right there. So we think it's actually 1 alderman per ward for both Gallatin and Cleveland to make the numbers work.
it could be.
But
Yeah.
if they have an odd, if they have 7 aldermen and 5 wards, you're not gonna put 1.42.
No, they have 2 at large. See in the last
Yeah.
column?
Yeah,
Oh, I got you.
there's 2 at large.
So
That's
that is the
correct.
case, Jamie and Gallatin?
Yes.
So that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
just a typo in the number of aldermen per ward.
Where's the typo?
Gallatin should be 1 alderman per ward,
The numbers across should
Oh,
be
I got
5,
you.
5, and
Yes, I
2.
got you. Well, yeah.
and
We'll
in
make,
Cleveland, the same thing.
yes, well,
5, 5.
let's make a note of that, Lauren, and we'll make sure we correct that before it goes to Bowman. Okay. Thank you so much for catching that.
Sure.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, so before we move on to 8 wards, I just want to go around and make sure that we've answered all the questions and had all the discussions we need for the 6-ward map. So start with Mr. Hawkins,
No questions.
Ms. Ruttenberg,
Oh, I'm sorry, no questions.
Ms. Collins,
No questions.
Mr. Johnson.
No.
Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Slattery,
No.
Mr. Tummons.
No.
Okay. Without any further discussion, let's go ahead and move on to line item B, number 2, 8 wards. So Keith, if you want to bring
Yes.
that up and let's look at that.
We'll do that. And everybody has got a copy we printed off of that 6th ward.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
got that.
Thank you.
This is the 8 ward map. And it does, and JP, you might want to go in there and unselect the water portion between the peninsulas like we did on the other one. And we distributed this out. It was a little challenging in getting the 8 wards, but you can kind of see how it's distributed. We did end up with kind of an odd situation in both peninsulas, specifically the Walton Ferry, Sanders Ferry Peninsula, where we kind of had this split, lightning bolt kind of split down the middle. And then you could see Ward 4 had to kind of go down deep into Ward 3. Ward 5 kind of stayed very similar to what it already is. It just contracted a little bit. And on these numbers, these will not necessarily jive up with the 6 wards that we have because there's 2 more. And you can just kind of see the distribution. Again, we did look at where large and middle-sized neighborhoods were and tried to keep neighborhoods together. But I think on the 8, there were probably some medium-sized neighborhoods that had to be split in order to make that work. I think demographically, it was pretty evenly, very similar to what we were looking with the six wards. And we can answer any specific questions that anyone had. And again, just like we did with the 6 wards, we can change lines. This one, it gets a little bit more difficult when we start moving lines because it Tetrises everything and pushes it around. But we can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Free. So just before we start discussion, I just want to remind everybody that kind of the goal the citizen talked about who came in was to try to keep the peninsulas together, and you can see in this map it's not. It's kind of all split up. We've given 8 wards, and so let's keep that in mind as we go through this discussion. Mr. Hawkins.
I think that as much as I was a fan of 8 wards when we went into this, I think that we are kind of backpedaling what we were trying to accomplish, looking at this. And I understand, it's an impossible task, right? You can't cut it horizontally, you have to cut it vertically. Either way, you're going to be splitting at neighbors that have very consistent, very consistent concerns into different wards. And so as much as I liked the idea, as we discussed it at last meeting, I don't think, knowing full well that we can't go back to 12, and knowing full well that we were tasked with basically redistricting 6 wards, this is difficult for me to get my arms around and say, yeah, this is the right direction to go. So that's my take.
Yeah, Ms. Ruttenberg.
Yeah, I would concur completely. I thought that this would be something that we should discuss, and I no longer feel that way.
Yeah. Ms. Collins.
I concur as well.
Mr. Johnson.
6 wards, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Mitchell. Okay. Ms. Slattery.
I'm hesitant to give up the idea of 8 wards because I think it's better. The map, the peninsulas and the river do not help. I do think that it's better that Ward 2, as it's represented on this 8 ward proposal, is at least not we don't have a ward that is split and part of it is on 2 different peninsulas. There's at least that going for it. So I was happy to see that. I guess I'm still tied up with 12 is an awful lot of aldermen. And how do we get away from 12 aldermen? The only way the math works is to look at 8 wards.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. We'll come back to that. All right, Mr. Tummons.
Yeah, this doesn't work for me, 8 wards. This map doesn't at least, so,
Okay.
no.
So something I want us to consider, I know at the last meeting, we had a motion and an agreement that we wouldn't look at 4 wards. However, whenever I talked to Mr. Free on this, they actually, in doing 8 wards with the thought of doing 8 representatives, did do a map of 4 wards. And so I'd like a motion just for us to look at it and see
so
what the
moved.
thoughts are. So can I have a motion?
A motion so moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so JP, can you pull up the map with 4 wards just so we can look at it?
No problem.
Okay. And then if we need to, we can have a short break for JP to print it off for everybody. It wouldn't be as beautiful as the other ones, but, it is what it is.
And while JP's doing that, I'd like to make a motion, knowing that what we know now that we didn't know, is to strike the 5 wards. I don't think, if you have 5 representatives, it doesn't work because you have even number, and then the 5 wards doesn't work because we can't go from 12 to 10.
Yeah.
So
think
I
we
would
already
like to
did
move
that.
that we strike the 5 wards and at least narrow our focus a little bit.
Okay. So we have a motion to strike out
I
5
second that.
wards. Okay, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. All right, Keith, so if you want to start with talking about Ward 4, and JP, if you don't mind, would you do a printout for us too of this while Keith is talking
problem.
about it? Thank you, sir.
And what we did is when JP created the 8 ward map, then as we were looking at it, I was just saying, hey, let's, I know we're not looking at a 4 ward, but let's combine the 2s and see what a 4 would look like. And this is what it looks like.
You want to talk about the geographic of where
Yeah.
the lines are and how
Yeah.
you came up with that?
And so what it actually worked out, as we worked on the 8 and then combined that to 4, is let's zoom into Main Street in the middle by right in there. And so basically, everybody gets everybody gets a piece of Main Street. So all of them have a piece of Main Street, and then additionally, the peninsulas are completely contained. So it seemed to work out pretty good. Can you go north and, let's look at that, yeah, we still got this issue, well, and you can see on that, what we talked about previously, I can't remember who talked about it, about that little tail.
Ms. Ruttenberg,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
Ms. Ruttenberg.
Where we and we switched that from 6 to 3, that area. You know, you can see on this one, it worked out that it connected through there. And so this is the 6.
JP, can you zoom out for us, just so we can look at it again? Thank you.
The 6, of course, is closer related to what we have, does eliminate, this division all the way down the peninsula, of 2. This 4, it is a radical change from what we have. I don't know, you could change to that many, but then if you did that and you kept 12 aldermen, then you're gonna have 3. You're gonna have 3, which, you can't, if it triggered us down into the state statute, by the state mayor charter, and we dropped out of the grandfathered thing, then by having 4, let me just look at that real quick. 4, you could have either one alderman per ward, or 2. So you could have 8, or you could have 4 with that.
And then,
But not 12. There's not you can't have 3 per ward.
can we look at the
And make that-
demographics real
Yeah.
quick? Is that it, JP?
Yes, this is
Okay.
the district summary report with all the demographic breakdowns.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
gonna say,
Sorry
you're
about
gonna have
that.
to
That's kind of
narrate.
small print, so you might have to.
It's late in the day. Thank you, JP.
Oh, that's great.
Thank
There you go.
I need to turn it on. With a 4-ward combination, Ward number 1 would have a population of 15,736 with a deviation of 1.93. And then when we're looking at the non-white Hispanic population is 76.62. All that looks comparable to the other things we've looked at. Ward 2 has a population of 15,550 with a deviation of less than 1%, so that's right on the money. And non-Hispanic white population in Ward 2 of the 4 wards is 82.55%. This is a higher non-Hispanic white population, but still within those margins that we've talked about. And then Ward number 3, that is about 1.5, a little over 1.5%. Deviation has a total population of 15,181. And then looking at the demographic information, non-Hispanic white population is 68.92, with a total Hispanic population of 10.33 and a non-Hispanic black population of 13.97. It's still statistically close to the other areas, but definitely the minority population within this one is higher than the other wards. And then the last, Ward number 4, population of 15,286, with just like a negative 1% deviation, real close. The non-Hispanic white population is 80.26%. Total Hispanic population, 4.64%. The non-Hispanic black population is 7.96, so that's fairly comparable to those other ones. So other than Ward 3, the demographics are really close, are pretty tight, but then across all 4 wards, it's still pretty, pretty close.
JP, we bring the map up again, please, for us. So let's have a discussion about this. I want to start with Mr. Hawkins, and just any questions or any comments about the 4-ward map.
When I was thinking about the 8, this is kind of what I pictured, right? I pictured some sort of even distribution, crosshairs, and this is really, it's amazing how it works out. I mean, the deviations were all within 1 or 2%, especially since you have geographic boundaries. You also have some major thoroughfare boundaries as well. Our charge is to provide the redrawing of 6 wards, but also provide a recommendation. This is what I would go with, just because this kind of checks all the boxes that I had drawn in my head for this project.
Yeah. Ms. Ruttenberg.
I really, really like that every ward has a piece of Main Street. I think that is really, really it's a thing of beauty. But are you saying that if we do this, if we change from 6 to 4, we automatically fall out of the grandfather situation?
Mr. Free.
Okay, so any change is a change.
Yeah, I don't know that it would, and that may be something I need to ask Mr. Bradley. We did talk about this, but this would change it where then if you maintain 12, then there had to be 3. And right now, we have 12, but there's 2. And I just don't know, it'd definitely be a further difference, instead of just the number, then the number per ward would actually be different. But then it is already in the 6, because we have 2 for 6 wards. And actually, the way the statute works is that if you had 2 to 4 wards, you could have one or 2, all maximum of 1. No, a minimum of 1, but a maximum of 2 per ward. But if you had 5, 6, 7, 8, then you can only have 1 in any of those things. So,
But what you just quoted there says we can't have 3 aldermen per ward.
well, in this, then the question is, would this trip us into falling out of our grandfather status?
And that's the question. Is
Yeah.
that something we can find out easily?
We'll find it out this evening.
Okay.
I'll find it out here just in a little bit.
We can take a break after discussion, and you can call if you want to. Just hold on for just a second. Okay.
Okay, I have
Any
no
other
further
question?
questions.
Okay. Ms. Collins?
I like how this looks as well, because it keeps, based on our citizen comment, how the wards are together, the population is there, and it does give equal balance to a point. And the question would be the same as my predecessor: how will it affect the grandfather part of it? Yeah.
Okay.
But the way that it looks right now, it does look good.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Collins. Mr. Johnson?
I agree, it looks good, but I think we have to remember that we've been brought together here as a committee to redraw the lines only. I think that's been made clear by Mr. Bradley. Also stated that we're here to redraw the lines, not to change the number of wards or the number of aldermen. I think after watching the first meeting, I know that one of the main instructions was to keep it simple and small changes. So I personally, and I think Mr. Free just called it a radical change. So I don't think we need to be considering a 4-ward concept. I think what we have with the 6 wards is what we need to consider, and also provide maybe 2 or 3 variances or variations of the 6-ward concept for the board to consider.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, I think it's clean. It visually looks better. And with respect to Mr. Johnson's comments, I'm wondering from a constituent response standpoint, maybe that's not something we should be concerned with, but by going from 6 to 4 wards, and potentially 2 aldermen per ward, what does that do to, does that increase their workload with respect to?
It's a good question. So what would the workload go to if you did have 4 aldermen or 4 wards and 2 aldermen per?
It's a little over 7,000.
They'd go to about
7,500.
7,500.
Yeah.
7,500?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so 7,500.
Okay.
And what is it today?
5146.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Ms. Slattery?
I like the map. I think I like the way it naturally sort of sits over the geography of Hendersonville. To your point, Mr. Johnson, about what our instructions are and keeping it simple, there was discussion in the BOMA meeting where this committee was discussed, and there was even a motion or an ordinance, or I don't know what it was called. Somebody discussed whether we should ask this, they should ask this committee to look at 4 wards, 6 wards. So I think the thought was introduced, the possibility was introduced. And as a single citizen of Hendersonville, I firmly believe 12 is too big. You look at the last page of each one of these maps, and if we're going to start talking about the number of aldermen that we have, and you look at this map, we have far and above any other city that's even close to our size. So it seems like a natural evolution of this conversation to me as we look at the district lines and what we need to do, and considering a rethinking of the number of wards, that naturally leads into a rethinking of the number of aldermen as well.
Yeah, yeah, very good comment. Mr. Cummins?
I think if we're going to go to the state mandated 8 aldermen, then this is the map we use. But I think that's better than the 8-ward map, this 4-ward with 2 aldermen per ward, if that's what we're going to do. But we probably will lose our grandfather clause for sure.
Okay. You're still checking on that? Okay,
The
all
city
right.
attorney's going to call us back. That would really be something for him to weigh in on.
Something I just want to mention, this is just a personal comment. When we first met, everybody was in consensus that 12 was too much. Like around the board, it was like 12 is just too much. But then, well, I know you, Mr. Johnson wasn't here. But,
And I don't hold that same consensus, but,
okay.
okay.
But also to your point, and also to Mr. Hawkins' point, was it does need to be something that needs to be simple. However, I do think that taking as many maps as we desire to BOMA isn't a bad thing. I think this is just, hey, we decided that this is a clean, nice-looking map. I mean, look at all the things it does. It's pretty amazing. It would be nice if we could get this. We understand that you're BOMA, and this is your decision. So I don't think it'd be a bad thing personally to present this to BOMA. However, I think that the concentration on 6 wards is going to be more realistic. That's just my personal viewpoint of that on the record. Yes, Ms. Wendy, yeah.
So I keep going back to the last page in each of the map packets that we have that list all of the comparable cities and the comparisons. And if you look at the workload, the number of citizens per representative, per alderman, going to 8 aldermen puts us right in that 7,500, which puts us dead middle of this list.
Yeah,
Dead middle,
yep,
which I think says something.
correct, yeah.
In
Mr. Hawkins?
And I think we were all in consensus that Hendersonville is unique, and we all love Hendersonville. And so, you know, I look at this saying, I was looking for comps. I don't want us to function like these other cities, because I think our city functions very, very well the way it exists. I just wanted to know with the comp, the average is 7988 of all of these, and if we go to 7,500. And to Mr. Johnson's comment, you know, I think 6 is what we'll put forward as our main recommendation, but I think we put forward, you know, something that, at least food for thought, to say, look,
Yeah.
this is clean, this is something that, based on the math and based on the comps and based on all this other stuff outside, just you're talking the numbers and you're talking about the cleanliness of the map, I think we would, you know, get a little more detailed than just it's a clean map.
Yeah.
But I think we need to put something else, at least food for thought.
Okay.
Knowing that our only charge in this is redrawing a six district map, a 6 ward map.
Ms. Ruttenberg?
Yes, I'd like to go on, and I concur, just to clarify, I want to go on record with our recommendations for 6, as is, redrawn. But I also want to go on record, just kind of for future purposes, that we also evaluated and liked the idea of 4. And I wouldn't expect that to be the one recommendation that they accept. But I like having the idea that we put that forward as a recommendation for maybe future committees like ours.
Yeah, okay.
They won't be the first.
No, they're, yeah. Ms. Collins, any other food for thought?
No, I concur with that. I think that, the 6, it's there, but there's an option to think about futuristic.
That goes with this.
And then it goes in it before that, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, anything else?
No, not there.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell? Ms. Slattery?
The only other thing that sorry. The only other thing that I would, you didn't point at me, William,
I
that's good.
did. They're all supposed to be on.
Oh, but we still have a,
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right about that.
I keep hearing what Mr. Bradley said, and it's interesting if he's retelling that the reason they changed, that the legislature put a maximum of 8 is because of what happened in Hendersonville. So there are a lot of minds that are far more astute than mine that looked at this and recognized that 12 was getting out of hand, and they put a cap of 8 for a reason. So that just plays through my mind.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we're going to make recommendations to BOMA, or just give them proposals and give them with good faith and allow them to evaluate them, and they will do what they think is best for the city. But I definitely would like to see this as one of the proposals that we put forth.
Okay. Duly noted. Mr. Tummons?
I just think that I don't know how many proposals we're going to go in with, but I think less is better.
Yeah.
I think maximum of probably 2 is probably the best. I just don't think we need to give them, pages and pages of options and say this committee's recommending this one, but we've also got this one we like too. That's just my opinion as far as presenting that to the board, so.
And I think kind of what you're saying is, just to reiterate what you said last time we went around for discussion, was that if we did have to go down to 8, this would be the best.
4, yeah, and 2 per ward.
2 per ward, yeah, okay. Just want to make sure. Yes, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Probably the bigger reason that the state reduced the maximum number was because situations in some cities where you literally had nobody willing to run for alderman. And smaller cities typically were as if you had 12 aldermanic spots you had to fill, and literally you had some wards where you had nobody on the ballot. And that was a problem they were running into, especially in cities that were smaller than Hendersonville, but it was becoming a problem in some cities in Tennessee. So that's probably the main impetus of why reducing the total number of people who are running. In Hendersonville, that's never been an issue. We've always had enough people running, that's undoubtedly.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Without any further discussion, let's move to line item letter C, number 1, Alderman representation options. Number 1 is 1 per ward.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Before we move to C,
Yes.
can we revisit B?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I'd like to move to strike the 8-ward option.
Yes. Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we already did that. Okay, great. So we have a motion to strike the 8-ward option. We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, thank you. I thought we'd already done that, but that was for 5 wards, not 8. Okay, thank you for that. All right, C1, 1 per ward. We'll start with Mr. Hawkins. And let's concentrate on the 6 wards right now. That seems to be the one that we have on the table. So we'll start with 6 wards. And then the 6 wards. Let's start with that.
And I think that's a draconian cut. I mean, truthfully, you've put us from the smallest workload to one of the largest. I mean, in terms of the number of people represented. because I think we have about 61,000 people, somewhere thereabouts. So you're talking about 10,250. So there's only 2 on the comp list that has more people represented. And you've lost your grandfather, which is something that has to be considered because there's a growth potential. I mean, obviously 10% growth over the next 10 years. You can't go backward. And so I think if we're seriously considering 6 wards and 4 wards, I don't think one alderman per ward works.
Good. Mr. Ruttenberg?
Yeah, I concur
Yeah.
completely.
Okay. Ms. Collins?
I also concur.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
2 per ward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Mr. Mitchell?
2 per ward.
Ms. Slattery? Mr. Tummons?
Definitely 2 per ward.
Okay, well, I don't think we need to hit number 2 then.
I
That's
would
pretty.
like to move that we strike 1 per ward as an option.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. So, let's talk about, I want to do 2 things. So we're way ahead of schedule. I want to revisit 6 wards and just look at that map one more time. JP, you got it up? I want to have one last discussion on if we want to, if there's any other changes we want to make to this before we make a motion to present this option as an option to BOMA. And I'll start with Mr. Hawkins.
I have no changes.
Okay? Ms. Ruttenberg?
I have no changes, and upon reflection, and I concur with Mr. Johnson on this, at the top of Ward 2 on this map that we're looking at on the slide, the presentation, that divide, I think that even with that divide, that is a very natural ward. They have the same considerations around, go down a little bit, we're looking at that's right. That right there, they have the same natural concerns with that kind of narrow Drakes Creek Park area. I think those folks on both sides of Drakes Creek have a lot in common, and any changes to Drakes Creek affect both sides of that ward.
You're talking about the,
I'm talking about Ward 2 as it's up there.
I
It's
see,
not Ward
okay.
2, well, yes, it is.
Yeah.
I think that lake between the 2 sides of Ward 2 below Main Street there,
including the small intestine.
well, I would love to not have that. It's not tidy.
Think so?
But-
it could be done.
Without regard to that lower intestine, referring to the upper part, the Drakes Creek, both sides of that Drakes Creek Park, I think they have a natural kind of interest in common.
So JP, you think Mr. Freese suggested that maybe he could cut that off. JP, can you look
You
at
could do a
that?
hard line there that doesn't follow a natural street. Is that what you're
We
suggesting?
can't
I can't do it in
with this
this.
software.
Yes.
But we believe it can be done with the minimum amount of population that's there. We think that could be done, and it would make a lot of sense.
It would look a little tidier.
Yeah.
Would
You're
that,
talking about the sticking into Ward 4.
Yes.
That's the only issue I have.
did,
Yeah.
I think we can do that, and we can work out the numbers and look at the households.
But we're
And-
charged for, contiguous and
Yeah.
things in common. And I do think both sides of Drakes Creek towards Main Street have a common interest.
and just for clarification, so if you did cut off that little portion from Ward 2, what would that skew the deviation, the population deviation?
Not much.
Okay, all right.
How much, let's look, JP, just real quick. How many people are in that particular block group?
Give me just a second to pull that up.
Yeah, we'll see how many people are in that.
It's going to look really weird for a second because it's going to imply another set of colors on top of this, but just look at the numbers.
Okay.
No deal.
Ooh. I meant it.
What does that say?
154, I think.
154.
It's 154 in
Yeah,
this block group.
And
Yeah.
the entire.
In,
In the,
Yeah.
yeah.
so
And I think that 154 would probably have more in common with the people to their right on this map than,
In the people above.
than 3 people who might have been on that street either side. Does that make sense? We're dividing, instead of 154 people from their neighbors across the street, maybe you have a line running through a couple of houses there, and that affects, 4 or 5 houses rather than 154 that should be with the people across the street perhaps,
Yeah.
if I may say so.
Yeah,
So-
if that's doable. I
If
Miss-
that's doable. Other than
think it's
that,
possible
I
to do that.
was just
Okay.
gonna, my comment is primarily that I think that those people on both sides of Drake's Creek near Main Street have a lot in common with their interests, and the lake being between them is a very minor concern.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Collins, any further discussion or questions on how the map should be
No further discussion.
moved? Okay. Mr. Johnson?
I concur with what was said earlier.
Okay, great.
Yep, nothing for me.
Mr. Mitchell? No? Okay.
Nothing from me.
Slattery? Mr. Tummons?
No, I agree with Debbie. If we could get that
Small intestine.
Small intestine.
snipped
JP,
off.
is that something you can do now, or is that something we need to wait for later, or
To cut this,
for you to go in there with your scalpel and remove that?
Let's put a fake road in.
I would have to go.
No offense to the people that live there,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I don't want them to have a rallying cry.
Yes,
I don't
Sorry.
think we can do, I don't think we can do it tonight.
That's fine.
But it,
Yeah.
but it, we
it's
can
nominal.
get it done.
It
Yes.
is very-
It can be changed, it just, I can't do it with this web-based software,
Right.
so.
And there are those other areas that we have annexed in that we can't really represent on this very well as well. So there'll be some other areas. Once it does go to the comptroller, we'll have to explain where those are. On this map, JP, do you have up there at the north where we have annexed? Is this one show those areas?
I can add that in really quickly.
Okay, let's see.
It doesn't save every time, that's why I
gotcha.
have to.
No, I don't think there's any houses on there, but we need to we would need to have clarity as to where they go, just to make sure, because there is one right on the edge that I think probably looks like it's on the west side of Anderson, which probably would go more towards 6, but I just wanted to make sure we have clarity of that.
Yes, sir.
Is there any high-density population there that would skew these numbers?
No, these are vacant, currently vacant.
Thank you.
So the Anderson Road annex would go in towards 6, you believe?
Yeah.
And then the other one
Into Ward 5?
will go into 5?
And then there's a little one up there at the very top that would
Okay.
go into 6.
Near Long Hollow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's the Durham.
Those are the only
Okay.
3 annexes?
Yes, I think JP, those were the only ones. Yes, sir. Saundersville Road? Not yet.
Okay, so without any further discussion, can I have a motion to send this map, to have this map part of what we send to BOMA for redistricting?
Motion, yes.
Make a motion. We have a second. Mr. Johnson seconds. We have, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Will you pull up the 4-ward map for us? We'll have a final discussion on the 4-ward map. And then, if we agree this is something that we can send off to, we'll have a motion and a vote, but I'd like to have a final discussion on this map as well. So anything further to say about 4-ward map, Mr. Hawkins?
I think if we don't put, and I think the word radical was moved, it was too much, too big of a word. I think if we put something that's well thought out as an option moving forward, at least you lay the groundwork for these future discussions.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's gonna be today, but I think this is.
Well, and who's to say that one day the state says you have to have 8?
Right.
Well, then they already have the groundwork for that.
And this is really
I don't think
elegant
that's
in
out
its
of the-
simplicity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I like about it. It's elegant in its simplicity. The boundaries kind of fall out.
Okay. Ms. Ruttenberg?
I agree.
Okay. Ms. Collins?
I agree.
Mr. Johnson? Okay. And we're just talking about discussing this map if we want to move it or anything. So, Mr. Mitchell?
Yep, I agree.
Okay, Ms. Slattery?
No, I agree. I think it's visually.
Mr. Tummons?
Like it.
Okay. All right. So given that, let's have a motion on the table to also present this to, as an option, either now or in the future, to board. We have
Second.
Mr. Tummons, Ms. Slattery has a second. All in favor say aye. All
Aye.
opposed say no. Ayes have it. And Mr. Bradley is back here. And Mr. Bradley, would you like anything to say before we?
That question.
Well, I
Ms.
mean,
Slattery.
Oh, Miss, okay.
I'll repeat what I said earlier about the charge of the committee.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, we're good.
I'll repeat what I said earlier about the charge of the committee was to decide where the 6 districts should be, the 6 ward lines should be. Beyond that, I think the question is, could you have 3 aldermen for 4 wards? That would not work with staggered terms, with 4-year terms, unless you went to some sort of at-large in each ward voting where you vote for 3. That really defeats one man, one vote. That's contrary to what everyone says you need to be doing. You could do that. You could have 3, but under the charter provision, probably that's not even legal, because it says the city may by ordinance, establish wards, increase or decrease the number of wards, increase or decrease the number of aldermen, and then it goes like to no fewer than 2 and no more than 8. So I think any change takes you out of the grandfathering provision. I mean, it's one of those things, I could argue it the other way if it made sense, but it really doesn't make sense to put 3 in the same ward, because the staggered terms and the 4-year terms wouldn't work. And when we certainly don't have the authority to have 6-year terms or anything like that, with 2, 2, and 2, like the state senate. It wouldn't make any sense. So as a practical matter, it really wouldn't work.
Does anybody question that or not understand? Okay.
You could argue that you could do it as far as the legality, just to flat out say we could, but there's no way that I can think of that you could transition that 3 people in 1 ward because of 4-year terms.
I didn't think about that.
Anything else, Larry?
Thank you for coming back.
No problem. I live in that little part of what he called the intestine there.
Keith called it actually a small
Down
intestine.
Cherokee Road in the little.
Duly
So I
noted.
wasn't
Mr.
very
Stiles
far
said
with that.
That was Mr. Stiles.
I'll probably get a meme about that later.
There's a Facebook group forming right now.
Right now. We live in the, all right, so,
Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
thank you, Mr. Bradley. So we have 2 maps that we're sending to Boma to review. I don't think we have anything else. Mr. Free, do you have anything else for discussion?
I think that's it. With what you're sending both of those, but is there a primary and a
Yes.
secondary?
Yes.
These aren't equally weighted.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure that we were very clear that these 2 recommendations are not equally weighted.
Okay, so, any other discussion about that? Yes, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I think it should be made clear that it's the 6-4 that we're sending, and the other one is just a future proposal,
Okay.
maybe, to be considered in the future, because it has to be
Okay.
done by ordinance, like Mr.
All right, so let's have a motion on the table that the 6 wards would be the primary and the 4 wards would be a secondary option. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Who was our second? Ms. Ruttenberg was our second. Okay. Mr. Mayor, you have a comment?
Well, go ahead and vote on that and just sort of finish up comment. Is this-
We did. Yeah, we're
Oh,
good.
I'm sorry. Your work isn't done. Appreciate very much, but at least you need to come back for another meeting to approve the minutes from this meeting. It sounds sort of silly, but we need you to do that at some point. And there is a possibility the board will send this back to you and ask you to make some changes based on different variables. That is certainly a possibility. Keith, I think this committee continues to exist until November 1st.
Okay.
It's something like that. So what we would need to do, at least what I would hope you all would be willing to do, is set a date to meet. Help me out, Keith, is it?
We already have a date.
Oh, that's right, y'all did that last
Week
week.
from today.
Awesome,
Yeah,
y'all
week
did that a couple
from
weeks,
today.
okay.
We can,
So,
we can have the minutes done by Friday. We
Yeah.
can have the minutes typed up.
Oh, you said we could?
We can have them done, yeah.
Okay, so
We can
y'all,
have them done
so
by
y'all be
Friday.
meeting on Friday, okay. So I would recommend what you do there is just come in and approve the minutes. And then that might be your last meeting. I don't necessarily anticipate that the board would send something back to you. More likely, the board would hash it out ourselves. And so that would free y'all up from ever having to meet after this next meeting coming up. So yeah, but in the meantime, don't talk to each other about this. Don't have phone calls about this. Best not to discuss this
Do we
until,
physically have to meet to approve the minutes?
you do have to physically meet to do that.
So are we doing that on Wednesday, the 27th, that we originally scheduled? or
We have a
we
meeting
to
for
do-
Wednesday, the 27th. You
Right.
guys can get it done by Friday, you said?
Because Debbie, that was a conflict for you, right?
No.
Tonight?
Yesterday was a conflict for me.
Oh,
We
okay.
moved it to Wednesday.
I hate to ask you to come together to just do that. Good news is it'll be the shortest meeting you will have had yet.
Right. Now, do we need a motion to meet this Friday briefly to approve
You know,
meetings? And that way,
Keith mentioned that he could get everything together by 4:30, so if everybody would just, thank you for not having your cell phones, by the way, but if you
Okay.
want to pull your cell phone out, right now is the time to do it, and if everybody can look at their calendar for Friday.
6 PM?
I'll be here.
No, 4.
We have four, thank you.
Four.
Yeah.
4.
I can be
4
here.
PM on Friday?
4 PM on Friday.
I can
No,
That's difficult.
I'll be traveling
you'll be
Friday.
traveling.
You're right.
Can he phone
right.
in?
No,
We have a problem, we have another problem.
We can't do Friday because we can't get notice out. This is Wednesday.
We have to give notice by 48
We
hours.
gotta meet next
So we're back to Wednesday, the 27th, 6
Yeah.
PM, we're in and out of here.
Thank you, Keith, I forgot what day it
Okay,
is.
Wednesday at 6.
On the 27th,
Yes, ma'am.
so the date originally
The
set.
date we originally set,
Here we go.
but Ms. Ruttenberg can't be here.
Oh, no, I can be. I
Oh,
have no
okay.
conflict.
Okay, okay.
Earlier, since we're just, it's a short meeting.
Does he,
Intervene
is there
on
any,
a lot of things.
is there any motion to come earlier that day? Does anybody want to come earlier that
I
day?
can come earlier, can you?
Can you come earlier?
5:30 is when is probably the earliest I can get here.
Well, let's just keep it at 6 then.
Okay.
Let's just keep it at 6. Yeah.
From downtown to.
All right, so
Easiest commute.
next meeting will be Wednesday, the 27th, October 27th at 6 PM. We'll meet back here and we'll approve the minutes.
I have
So-
not given you any idea how I feel about what y'all have done. However, there's no doubt about that I am very appreciative for the learning that y'all did and the time you came together and for the discussion you had. And I'll leave it at that as far as, and you'll hear my thoughts on what I feel about this map in a couple weeks. So thank y'all.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Freed?
I'd just like to extend a thank you and congratulations to JP Finnegan for all of his work, Lauren for her help and assistance with the minutes, and for Jason and IT for taking care of making sure we get this across the airwaves so everybody can.
Can we give everybody a round of applause?
Thank you.
Planning committee did a lot of work into this,
They did.
and Jason and IT did a fantastic job, so thank you guys so much. There was a lot of, if you got the packet, it's very thick, and they put a lot of work into this, so.
Motion to adjourn.
Can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion. So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
All in favor?